So to set a key in Maya means that I'm locking a position or a rotation or a scale or something, and I want to save it, right? So that's what setting a key means in terms of the software is I want to record this position. I want to lock it in. And the keyboard shortcut for that is S. S is the keyboard shortcut for set a key. So if I hit S, what you'll notice is this red tick mark happens on frame one, right? I'm on frame one. If I was on frame 41 and hit S, then, then the tick mark would go there. Okay. But I want to be on frame one. So if I want to undo, I just hit Z. You don't even have to hit Control Z or Z. It's just Z. Z is just the undo key in Maya, right? So you don't even need to hit Control, just Z will undo. I'm going to make sure I click over here. I'm just using my left mouse button. I can just click and drag here or just highlight or pop to a frame. There's frame one. I've got this at -45. I'm going to hit S and get my red tick mark. Okay, so that means now it's going to remember that key. If I go back to my planning, this one here. So I've got frame one. Then at frame 13, I have to create the other pose. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Maya. I'm going to go to frame 13. And then I'm going to move this over here. And again, I'll probably just go over to the channel box here and hit 45. Okay. And then you can see that there's no key yet. I have to hit S. So if I don't hit S, watch what happens. If I don't hit S and I move to a different frame, I lose my work. So that's a big bummer, right? So if you forget to hit S, you lose everything. There's no undo. And it also brings me to another setting that I'm going to introduce you to. And it's important to understand that this setting is good for animation, but it is not good, very much not good for other courses, particularly modeling. Okay. So I can go here and recreate that key. And then if I just hit S, right, then it turns red. You'll see that if I don't have a key, the channel box, it is pink, right? So, or salmon, whatever color you want to call this. That means that it has been keyed somewhere, but just not on that frame. As soon as I hit S, I see a red line here. The channel box also turns red. But if I go in between those two tick marks, you'll see that this is pink. And what's going on is the computer is interpreting from one side to the other. It's basically doing the in-between positions for me from key to key. Okay. Now I'm going to get rid of this key. I'll do this again. I'm going to show you another way. I'm going to right click here. And I'm going to say delete. There. Okay. So now I've deleted that key. I'm going to do this again, but I'm going to do another option. Down here in the bottom right-hand corner is this little icon that kind of looks like a steering wheel with a plus sign in there. This is the auto key button. So auto key, what this will do is it will automatically key anything that you change. So technically you don't have to hit S, even though you should, just to be safe. But it only works if you already have created a key. So you have to hit S somewhere. And then if I go to a frame, right, and make a change, with auto key on, it will automatically create tick marks for me, right? So anytime I make a change, right, it's going to create a key. It's going to remember that. But it will only key what I've changed. So if I had rotate X, Y, Z, but I'm only moving X, it only keys X. It doesn't key Y or Z. It doesn't key translate or scale. It only keys what you're tracking, right? So only the thing that you've changed, nothing else. When you hit S, it keys everything, key all, right? So that means all the rotates, all the translate, all the scales, everything. So S is the safer way to lock in a pose because you just key everything. But auto key is sort of a little safety net. If you forget to hit S, it will remember what you changed. Now, this is a good setting for an animator because that way, when you make poses, if you forget to hit S, it will remember the changes that you made. But if you were doing this in modeling class, when you're moving points around on the geometry, if you accidentally hit S, what it might start doing is AutoKey might actually animate your geometry. So rather than you building a model, it will kind of animate over frames. Because if you forget that auto key's on, if I had like all of these things selected, right, what you'll see is then if I hit S, right, on all of them to get it started, and then I key again, it will key all of them. But these are all locked, right? So they only have one rotation. This one here has translation. So we'll see what happens here. So let me just hit S. So now I've started the keying process and I go over here. If I just move this, it only keys that one thing, right? The others remain unkeyed. But if I hit S, key all, they all turn red, okay? But if I'm just using auto key and I only do, let's say, a rotation, it will only remember lock in a point for that channel that I changed. Okay, so it depends on what you're doing. If you're translating and rotating and scaling, it will remember all those things with auto key on, but it will only key what you've changed. So if you only rotated in one axis, right, or translated one axis, but if you move everything, yeah, it'll key. If you hit S, that's the safest way to key everything. So how do I select more than one? I could go to one key frame right here and right click on it and say delete, and it gets rid of that red tick mark. But what if I have a bunch? Well, then you have to select the frames first. And the way you select the frames is you hold down Shift. You hold down Shift and then you click and drag, and then that will highlight a range. So what you're doing is instead of working on one frame, now you've selected a range. You have basically highlighted a bunch of frames. And then you can right click on this and then choose delete. And that wipes out all the keys there. And I'm going to go back here. Well, now how do I fix this? Well, I have to go and zero out all of the rotations and translations. And I'll go to all of these and I'll go here and type in 0 and hit enter. And that puts everything back to the default position, right? Just to zero out the translations and rotations. So now I'm back to the beginning. We got these two keys, frame 1 and 13. And then frame 1, what I want to be able to is I want to copy this key. I want to have this key at 25. And I could go in here and just do this manually and just type in -45, right? That's one way I could put that key in there and then just hit S, lock it in. But I also want to show you how to copy keys and move them around and do other stuff. So if I don't have anything selected, there's no keys, there's nothing to copy. So that's an important thing just to remember. Is like if you get freaked out, where'd all my work go? You have to have it selected. If it's not highlighted, you won't see the keys. Okay. So once I've highlighted what I'm animating, then I go to frame 1, right click, choose copy, go to frame 25, right click, choose paste. There's two pastes. We want to use the top one. Just use the basic paste for right now, not paste connect, just paste. And that will paste that value in. Okay. If I want to delete this key, right click, choose delete. If you made a mistake and you're on the wrong frame, how do you fix that? Well, we looked at how you can highlight frames. Hold down Shift and drag, and that gives you a range. But what if you want just one? You just want one key. Then what you do is you hold down Shift and click, and then let go. And it highlights one frame, just one frame. Now you can go right here and move that key by just clicking and dragging. Okay. Just like you could select a range by holding down Shift and dragging a range, and you could move these keys around as well. When you're moving one key or a bunch of keys, it's important that you know the difference between these two arrows. The middle arrows are moving. The outer arrows are scaling. So that causes a bit of a headache when you scale things. So let me show you what happens. So if I go and select all of my frames, right, all of my keys, if I grab the middle arrows, I can pick up the animation and move it. So I'm just moving it to a different spot in the timeline. So instead of frame 1, now I'm dropping it at like frame 22. But the distance between all the keys is the same. It's still 12 frames apart. Nothing has changed. Just where it starts has changed. If I grab the outer arrows and click and drag, this will scale the animation. So now I'm stretching the animation. And what that means is that you are going to get decimals. So if I go over here, this looks like it's frame 68, but if I use the comma and the period keys, so comma and period will let you jump from one key to the next. So if you see red tick marks, you can use the comma and the period key to jump through your scene. Rather than going one frame at a time, you bounce from key to key. And you can see that now what I have is a key that's not a whole number, it's a decimal. And again, the computer doesn't care, right? It's all just numbers to this thing. So a decimal frame is totally acceptable. Nothing wrong with it, but it just means it's hard to select. It's hard to copy a key because the only thing I can do here is I can be on frame 33, but there's nothing on 33. It's on 33.08. So there's no way for me to copy that key very easily. So I'd have to use the comma and period keys. Now, if the keys are far enough apart, you can right click on a key that's a decimal and choose snap. And that will put it to a whole number. Same thing over here, right click and snap. But if you have really complex animation, really dense, particularly when you're taking animation and really crunching it into a smaller space of frames, usually what happens is the keys get so close together, they can't be on whole numbers. So you either have to live with that and learn how to work with it, or you have to go and find a way to sort of tease apart the decimals and just key the whole numbers around them and then go and delete the decimals that are left over. But I want everyone just to know that you want to be able to check your frames and make sure they're whole numbers for this assignment. And the way you do that is you have to select something and you see red tick marks and use the comma and the period, and that will go from key to key. If you see a decimal, then it means that you scaled the keys. Nothing wrong with that. It's just now it's not a whole number. It's a little harder to edit. To get it back to being a whole number, you just right click on it and then choose snap. The number of frames that I have, I only need 25, and you can see I have quite a bit. This is the time slider, and this is the range slider. So the range slider is kind of like a magnifier. This box down here, if you grab this bit here, you can move it around, and you can also grab these little squares, and this lets you expand how much or how little of a scene you want to look at or work on. So it's basically allowing you to look at the whole thing or a small chunk. And it comes with these numbers, okay? So when I restrict the number, right, how much I want to see, so if I go to this box and drag it, what you'll see is that this number here, the 113, is also here. So if I wanted to type in a number and say, I want to see up to frame 120, I can be really precise. I can type in a number, or I can just organically roll the box. So the inner set of boxes, this is the magnifier. This is a restricted amount of the scene. The outer boxes is basically the absolute range. How big is the scene? And right now it's 200 frames. I don't need 200 frames. I only need 25. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this back to 100%. And I'm going to change this one to 25. And what that does is it gets rid of the frames that I no longer need. Now my scene is only 25 frames. I don't have extra frames. That's it. If I want to change it, no problem. I can go in here and say I want 250 frames. You can get them back, right? So you can add frames, no problem, or you can take them away. Say I just need 25. And this will help us with the assignment because now we know we only have 25 frames. And when I hit the play button, right, what you might get is something like this, where it seems incoherently fast. It's just going by like crazy. So this is another setting that we have to get ready in Maya. And if I right click on the timeline here, playback speed, what we want to choose is real time. You can see what it's set to right now is play every frame free. So it'll play through the frames as fast as it can. So that means it'll go faster than 24 frames per second if it's a light scene. So I'm going to set it to real time. And then when I hit the play button, then it works.